I am going to be a bit more careful than I usually am. I'm going to kind of be reading from a script because everything that I say is taken down and used in evidence against me. I notice on the Twitter feed already bits of what I said at the last meeting are being tweeted out of context. So this is my safeguard. So guys, whoever's tweeting, just try and make it accurate this time. Okay, so here we have a situation in the Labour Party where even the most innocuous video can be used to accuse Jeremy Corbyn of anti-Semitism, where my local, once UKIP, now born again Tory MP, can make public the names and faces of women, suggesting that their protests outside a local arms factory making parts for Israeli drones that drop bombs on Gaza are anti-Semites. Being offended, can I remind everybody, being offended is not the same as having experienced racism. I'm asking, what is the cost to us as a movement when Macpherson is taken out of context and used against freedom of speech, when encouraged by disproportionate media attention, claims of racism are weaponised, where Chakrabarty's recommendations seem to me so far to have been pretty much ignored. I'm going to give you a little run through of my background, exactly as Naomi said, because my mother was of Jamaican descent, African and Sephardic Jew, from Portuguese Jews. And Portuguese Jews had an involvement in the slave trade. Yes, I said that, okay, I said that. And at some point, for a certain period of time, in certain places in the Caribbean, they had a significant part to play in the slave trade. And I am part of that heritage. But I'm also part of the heritage of my Ashkenazi Russian Jewish father who left Moscow in 1914 for the US. My parents met in New York. He was a communist and, like many Jews of his time, committed to the fight for the rights of oppressed groups. He was an internationalist. He believed in the struggle for desegregation and equality for all people. He believed that the struggles of all people were his struggles, Jewish or not. Now that proud tradition of Yiddish speaking, now mostly destroyed, of left, universalist, Jewish intellectuals and activists, is the Jewish history I claim as mine and is what I am most proud of. And that is the history that is going to be celebrated very soon at Cable Street. I am not interested in the liberation of a small section of humanity. I'm a socialist. I'm committed to the liberation of all humanity. That is what guides my politics. It guides my life. It's crucial to who I am. My parents were brought together by politics. So I suppose in a way you could say I was actually a political project. My mother was tortured and deported for un-American activities during the McCarthy period, the witch hunt where thought police, denunciations, media frenzy whipped up hatred to enable the establishment to maintain their control on American society. A witch hunt that terrorized and gripped a nation. A witch hunt that saw many prominent Jews, and note, I didn't say all Jews, I said many Jews, as well as others, silenced, ostracized, removed from employment. Now moving to the particular. My partner is also Jewish, and, you know, we also have a number of Jewish friends and comrades. I've been a member of Jewish organisations for some time, this one, and also Jews for Justice for Palestinians. I have worked in and been a victim of racism all my life. So you can understand my bewilderment when in May I was suspended from the Labour Party amidst false allegations of anti-Semitism. These allegations were lifted, and the allegations were addressed in parts of the Chakrabarti report, though given the continuing harassment of me, you would barely know it. And that harassment also goes on by certain Labour MPs who feel it's fine to tweet out to the Shadow Chancellor that he should no platform me because I am such a racist. Now we have been told that Jews are terrified to go to Labour Party meetings, that women are terrified to go to Labour Party meetings, that Momentum is anti-Semitic. Now, let's just forget for a moment that both the chair and the vice chair and many leading figures in Momentum also happen to be Jewish. But not only that, but I keep reading that the cause of this terror, this reign of terror, is Jeremy Corbyn. Interestingly, I've also read articles claiming that racism only occurred in the Republican Party when Obama was elected. Now, just look at the link there. Now, the irony is we have never had a leader so involved in anti-racism, not just in theory, but in the practice of his life. It's part of his political and his personal DNA. Interestingly, when I've responded to critics by pointing this out, apart from being next told, well, Jeremy is a terrorist sympathiser, isn't he? And other nonsense, the response has then become, well, it's not him, it's his followers, i.e. people like me and you. Now first, let me make it clear, all racism is abhorrent, and I'm not saying that anti-Semitism does not exist in the Labour Party. The Labour Party, after all, is a reflection of our society. But what I am saying is that the claim of its significance are being exaggerated for political purposes. And this has been done at a huge cost, both to our movement, to our communities, and to many individual people in and outside of our party. I'm also saying that anti-Semitism is no more special than any other form of racism. All racisms have their own characteristics and their own histories. All genocides have their own context. All Holocaust denial, whether it is of the Jewish or the African Holocaust, is a blasphemy against humanity. So what purpose do allegations of anti-Semitism have? Why is it happening, and who is paying the cost? It seems to me there is little, if any, hard evidence that the Labour Party has a major problem with anti-Semitism, though, as Chakrabarti says, there is an occasionally toxic atmosphere. Well, I've certainly found it toxic of late. The most fundamental aim of such allegations, I suggest, is to undermine Jeremy, silence his supporters, and ensure any chance of an alternative to the neoliberal diet of cutting services and taxes that has been dished up to us as politics until Jeremy got the leadership never actually gets to the table of the voters. Then there's silencing any criticism or any potential criticism of the Israeli state, attacking and undermining anyone who supports Palestinian rights or the boycott movement, and ensuring the flow of money and arms to Israel continues unabated and at whatever cost, either in the Middle East or to us. This political use of accusations has not only weaponized anti-Semitism, it has become a weapon of political mass destruction, and like all nuclear options, has entailed a high degree of collateral damage, not just to the Labour movement as a whole. And I'm going to now draw particular attention another barely mentioned outcome of this strategy. Because what is extraordinary amongst what can only be described as a tumult of accusations is that at this point, when discussions of racism in the Labour Party has had the most media attention that I have ever known, is that no person of colour, no group representing the interests of black and minority ethnic people has been heard, has been allowed to insert their perspectives on this debate, let alone be seen as being significant. Black people, yet again, have been made invisible. Now, Chakrabarti, of course, made a number of powerful observations about the exclusion of BAME people from the party, but that voice was soon drowned out against the clamour by the press and others to eke out the story that they and others seem to prefer, that of anti-Semitism. Now, blacks may, and they do, disproportionately vote for Labour, something like 2-1, but what they don't have is representation where it counts, in positions of power. Now, this most pressing aspect of Chakrabarti's report has not just been silenced. We are barely allowed to mention the position of people of colour in relation to Chakrabarti in case we are seen as denying a problem which, as far as I have experienced as a black Jewish woman with a Jewish partner and many Jewish comrades, exists only on the margins of the party and is certainly not reflected in who our representatives are, either within the internal structures of the party or in our representatives in Parliament. Now, all this has been aided and abetted by the complicity of a media that at times seems rabidly, anxiously anti-Corbyn. The Boris Johnson-style racism of the Tory party that renders Johnson's cheerful rendition of blacks with watermelon smiles as tolerable enough to see Johnson promoted to deal with the pickaninnies, that's his word to describe black people, by the way, to deal with the pickaninnies overseas as Foreign Secretary barely causes a stir.
It's great.
You really have to have a sense of humour or a very thick skin, black or white, to be involved in anti-racism and politics at the moment. And it's no longer just the Labour right involved in the debate, it's the right of the Tories, as in my own MP, and the far right joining together in a most unpalatable pact. Fascists in my own constituency in South Thanet no longer goose-step shouting Hitler was right. Instead, they feel empowered to shout anti-Semite at Labour and anti-racist activists, telling us how they now like the Jews while screaming abuse against what they call the Muslimics. Now, I've had to get used to harassment, but for others who've been involved in this, it has been terrifying. And by the way, anti-Semitism is not, as my MP would have it recently, anything like a virus. It's learned, not caught, and us as such can be unlearned. Otherwise, we would all have to give up, go and live in our separate ghettos. Calling racism a virus is the language of separation, and I will have none of it. Racism is about material reality. Racism is and always has been essentially about power. In terms of a political party, including Labour, it is most importantly about exclusion from power, lack of representation, voices never heard. As ever, people of colour marginalised and oppressed for centuries, victims of genocide, Holocaust, a stateless, diasporic people in this and other Euro-American countries have been effectively silenced and put into their place, into the political abyss. So let's understand the actions of the right, that their focus colludes with the enemies of our movement, colludes with the exclusion of people of colour from our party, and that they do this and are prepared to do this mercilessly and with one aim in sight, to further their own political agendas. So let's talk about the problem of racism in the Labour Party, and here's my challenge to the right. If you want to talk about racism, let's do it. Let's have that discussion, but let's have it, please, on an even playing field. Together, all sections of the party, all minority groups, and let's do it now.